Good morning, all of you, and hang in there for the next few hours. You are just, 4 or 5 hours away from a much-deserved break. Yes, give yourself a round of applause. Let me just make a couple quick remarks, and then I'll turn it over. I think the order is Tattnall, Jack, Mary, and Lauren. And this is actually a really, what I hope will be a very enjoyable school meeting, and an important one, because it is about 2 different grants that the school offers. And I hope many of you will be interested in them. And I'll just give the quick background, and then they will talk about the experiences they had with these grants. The first is one you've heard about called the Poole grants, and you should know the history. And you should know the history behind both of these grants because they're great stories and they're great Taft stories. Bob Poole was a great Taftie and a great American. I never knew him, but I've known his legacy since I arrived many years ago. He graduated from Taft in 1950, and after graduating from Yale and then serving in the Army, he came back here to teach and to coach, and he was a beloved educator, in particular with his football players. I meet alumni who still speak about him. And he was a great teacher, and his passion then and always was ecology, education, wildlife conservation, and he devoted his life to those themes. After he left Taft, he served in the Peace Corps, which of course you recall was started by President Kennedy, and he was in one of the original early years of the Peace Corps, and it was there that his love of Africa was born. He spent 2 years there, and then he stayed on and became one of the great conservationists, not just there, but indeed in the world. And he served as the director of the African Wildlife Leadership Foundation. He led in conservation efforts and education efforts, and in a way his life was Nonut Sibi writ large. He was tragically killed in a car accident, and then after that happened, a number of Taft friends stepped forward, contributed money to create a fund in his honor. And so for decades, students who have applied for Poole grants, and if they've been lucky enough to receive them, it's allowed them to go do research and community service work, primarily in conservation, but also all kinds of community service. So some of you may be interested in that, and if you have an interest in particular in wildlife conservation, ecology, and so on, that may be an area for you to be considering. The second is the Page Fellowship, and this has not been around as long, but it has a very similar kind of story. Meg Page was a Taft graduate from 1974. And she was, and I've met graduates from her class who speak so fondly of her. She was a vital and lively, spirited, bright woman. She went on to a very successful business career, and then tragically, at a young age, she was diagnosed with cancer. And even as she battled the disease, she served in the medical field. She was interested in research. She served on boards. She volunteered, and it was really typical of her. She was a fighter, and she wanted to serve even in her last days. And she decided then, with the full support of some Taft friends, to establish a fund after her death which would make it possible to support students who wanted to volunteer in some kind of medical research or medical field, doing research, interning at a hospital, going to conferences, and so on. And so to that end, to the end of her life, she was really thinking of others, and she was thinking about service really until the day she died. And over the years, I say, students have done all kinds of wonderful things. I've known students who've done week-long medical research, interning at hospitals. I knew a student who got involved in research with a doctor's office and spent 6 weeks in a doctor's office. So if you are at all interested in anything having to do with the medical world and learning more, you might apply for a Poole grant. So Mrs. Frew chairs that committee with a number of other teachers. A couple quick points about it, and then you'll hear from the students. Here's a great lesson. You will learn, if you apply, that skill of applying for writing a grant, for getting a grant. This is an important skill. Many of you are going to go on and do this in your own worlds, professional lives. The challenge of making the case, of appealing to a group and asking for money or support is an important skill. All of your skills that you developed as a writer here will be called on as you write that application. I would say this, they are not travel grants. You are not applying for a Poole grant or a Page grant simply to travel. These are service grants. Remember that. They are service in those 2 different areas. I would say that, now speaking for the committee, they are looking for impact. That is, they are hoping that their dollars will really have a big impact. Maybe if I could put it bluntly, if you applied to travel 15,000 miles to do 3 days of research, that's not going to be seen as positively as one in which the impact of the dollars will be more clearly felt. And some of the ones you'll hear from today are great examples of that. And then the last thing I'd say is I hope many of you apply. These are amazing grants, amazing opportunities, and we do our best to fund them. We generally cannot fund them fully. Usually the the number of applicants exceeds the amount of money we have, but they are great opportunities, and the 4 examples you hear today I hope will inspire you. Mrs. Frew will be sending out material later for those applications. So with that, and with hope that you have a wonderful weekend, I think we start off with Tattnall, so give them a round of applause.
All right, hello, Taft Academy, good morning. Dylan, looking good? All right, so this is my second time up here talking about this grant opportunity because the summer after my freshman year, with the help of the Page family, I went to Georgetown for a week to attend an institute that was basically a crash course in medicine, which you'll be hearing more about later this February. And I'm especially grateful for the generosity of the Page family because had I not gone on my first Page grant trip, I would not have been able to go on my second. Here, let me explain. So, there we go. All right. This summer, I shadowed Dr. Charles Frazier around for a week. Dr. Frazier is Surgeon-in-Chief, Chief of the Department of Congenital Heart Surgery, and Cardiac Surgeon in Charge at Texas Children's Hospital, which is the largest children's hospital in the world. He's also the Chief of Congenital Heart Surgery Division at Baylor College of Medicine and Director of the Adult Congenital Heart Surgery Program at the Texas Heart Institute. Additionally, he was offered the position of Surgeon General under former President George W. Bush, but declined. So in short, him, is a very esteemed infant heart surgeon. Dr. Frazier also happens to be a friend of my grandfather, and when I brought up my interest in medicine and told him about what I had done summer after my freshman year, he invited me to see what his life is like. So here's roughly what my daily schedule was. So I'd wake up at 4:45 a.m., arrive at the hospital then so that we could do rounds at the ICU, which is the intensive care unit. And during rounds, they would basically just give a summary on all of the patients, both pre-op and post-op, and tell them what had happened over the course of the night. 7 would be conference, so we would look at x-rays about the patients and how they would be treated or how their recovery was going. Around 9 a.m. was surgery, and then by 6, I'd have had dinner and going home, and I'd be fast asleep at 9. This is a photo of what the ICU looks like. So there's just tubes and monitors everywhere. It's really crowded, and again, he's an infant heart surgeon, so all of the beds are about the size of this podium. Overall, in the 5 days I was at the hospital, I observed 3 open heart surgeries that lasted 4.5 hours, 8 hours, and 9.5 hours straight. I also observed an Achilles lengthening procedure, 2 sclerosis correctional procedures, and a frontal orbital removal, which, though I will spare you the grosser details, meant that a few feet away from me, I saw somebody's skull get taken apart and put back together. I also had the opportunity to shadow their chief of reconstructive cosmetic surgery for a day, so I observed 13 operations from him, ranging from a skin graft to a tonsillectomy. And this is what the average operating room looks like. So everything that's touching blue means that it's already been sanitized and that there's no risk of contamination. So you're supposed to, if you're not scrubbed in, stay away from the blue tables, and then that's basically what's happening during the operation. There's surgeon and then surgeon's assistants around it, and then that's just an empty operating table. Now, my grant experience was unique because it was self-designed. It began somewhat by chance, because I just mentioned what I'd done summer after my freshman year, and then when I wanted to make it a reality, I scheduled flights and found out where I could stay, and then applied. Now, the range of programs and experiences for which you can apply for aid is, in my opinion, the best part about the Page Grant program, because I applied to get money for a plane ticket to Texas, but some people apply for money to go around the world to volunteer and learn about medicine in places like Africa and Asia. So the opportunities are all but endless. What I took away from my Page Grant experience this summer is that I want to be a surgeon when I'm older. Now, I already knew that I wanted to go into the field of medicine because of my last grant, but experiencing surgery firsthand and literally seeing lives saved right before my eyes, well, nothing I'd experienced really came close. It's a huge relief to know what I want to do when I'm older already, and I would not have this sense of relief if not for the Page Grant. Trust me, applying for a Page Grant is one of the best decisions I've made since coming to Taft, and I hope that many of you and the audience take the opportunity as well. To Mrs. Frew, the Grant Committee, and the Page family, I'm so grateful for your generosity. Thank you.
Hey guys, I'm Jack Ewing, if you didn't already know. This is my second time going up on stage, as the last time I went up I got roasted by Raymond. But here I go, and I'm going to talk about my experience using the Poole grant to go to the Allen School and do research with the Cape Eleuthera Institute. So this is the group of people that I did research with. When I met them all at the Nassau airport in the Bahamas, I really didn't know what to expect. I thought that they'd all have a lot of extensive background in marine biology, but little did I know it was pretty diverse. One girl didn't know how to swim at all. And then there were people who lived in Nassau who were very good, who had done a lot of research. But just to let you know, this girl learned how to swim throughout her trip and was able to do a 4-mile swim with us at the end of it. But it just kind of goes to show that no matter who you are, you can do this program. So my program was the Allen School expeditionary term, and it was a month long. It went from June 22nd to July 22nd. We spent 1 week on campus total, where we did classes, and then 3 weeks in the Exuma Keys where we did research. And there were 13 students, 9 girls and 4 guys. So while we were on campus, we lived in 3 tents, 1 for the guys and 2 for the girls. And while we were doing research, we lived on 2 30-foot Sharpie schooner pulling boats, which is basically a sailboat that when there's no wind, you have to row because there's no motor. But it was still really fun. Still really fun. So Eleuthera, where the campus is based in just southeast of Florida, and the Exuma Keys where we did research is just southwest of Eleuthera. You can kind of see it in the square where Eleuthera is. So our daily routine kind of ranged a lot, depending on if we were doing research or if we were on the campus. But every day we woke up at 6 o'clock and we did a morning exercise that would be either running or swimming or a combination of both. And then we would have breakfast. On the boat it was pretty crammed, as you can see in the bottom right, and we would be sharing meals together that we made on the boat. But when we were on the campus, we had a sustainable breakfast or lunch at the cafeteria. And then throughout the day, we'd be taking classes. As you can see in the top left, we kind of did in this canopy, I guess you could say. And we would be taking class on marine ecology, marine biology, and just to prepare us for the research we would do in the coming week. Oops. So the research we did, the 13 of us broke up into 4 groups, and in those 4 groups we researched 4 different topics, which were diadema, which is urchins. Diadema have been dying off, especially Diadema antillarum, and their population has been dying off, and they're really important to reef ecosystems. We also researched conch, which is a staple in the Bahamas and is very important to the economy of the Bahamas, and has been overfished and improperly fished. Lionfish, we also researched, is a extremely invasive species to the Bahamas, and it has been able to kill off entire ecosystems, so they're researching their populations. And then my group researched grouper. So grouper is a very important species to the Bahamas, both culturally and economically. And it's been dying off recently, especially the Nassau grouper, which was the specific one that we studied. And we were trying to find out why they might be dying off. So our research instructor, Rod Drumming, had us study grouper behavior and how that might be impacted by how they're fished, because the main way that grouper are fished is by spearfishing. So if they are very naive, then they're going to be killed off much more easily than other species. So this was the research group that we were in. On the left is my instructor, and his name is Rob Drummond. Absolute legend, to say the least, very smart. And then on the right is the 3 of us that stayed together, me, as you can see, Avery in the middle, and she wanted me to say hi to Mary Alice Ewing. And then on the far right is Zoe Dunkley, another good friend of mine. So the species that we studied was the Graysby, the tiger, the Nassau, and the black grouper. And the objectives of our study were to collect the pioneering data for this research in the Exuma Land and Sea Park, which is a marine protected area. We were also there to assess and compare grouper naivety on a species level between those 4 different species, and to determine the impact of fishing pressures on grouper behavior in the Bahamas. So the method in which we did our research was by finding 2 distinct distances, which were the flight initiation distance and alert distance of grouper. So those are basically just the distance that a grouper is alerted by a predator and the distance that it's alerted to the point where it will try and flee a predator, which was us in this case. So the way in which we did this was we carried 2 rocks, 1 red and 1 yellow. The red was for the flight initiation distance and the yellow for alert distance. So we'd approach a grouper that we found until we saw a sign that was alerted, where we dropped the first rock. And then we continued to approach it until it fled in some way, and then we dropped the second. And then from there we'd use a transect line, which is a measuring device, to measure from the first rock to where the grouper was for the alert distance, and then the second rock from where the grouper was, which is the flight initiation distance. Our results overall were pretty skewed, and they didn't reflect our hypothesis at all because our data was very small, so we couldn't make any conclusive evidence from it. But what we do know in our analysis is that our inability to visit research locations would affect this because we couldn't get a lot of data. And then we also had a lot of problems because the time of the day would affect it, the current and the weather conditions would affect the grouper behavior. But what we know is that further research on this topic is required, and that human interaction, regardless, affects grouper. And then I'd just like to say thank you to the Poole Grant Committee, the Island School, Cape Eleuthera Institute, Hurricane Island Outward Bound, which provided the boats that we lived on, and Rob Drummond and Ami Adams for basically being parents to me during this month. And if you have any questions, please ask me. This was the best time of my entire life. I'd definitely do it again. Thank you, guys.
Hi everybody, my name is Mary, and I was able to spend a week with the Cape Eleuthera Institute FLATS program in the Bahamas. We focused our time working on the mangrove and flats ecology systems, and the interns learned about bonefish research techniques and how it's conducted at the Cape Eleuthera Institute and in the Bahamas in general. I just wanted to show you a few really great things about the campus that contribute to their mission to preserve the beauty and wildlife of the Caribbean. And I have a quick video to show you. So pay attention to the first scene. It looks blue, but really pay attention because that was an enormous aggregation of bonefish, which is quite rare to see at the site we were at. So enjoy.
You'll never feel happy. Never feel happy. No, you won't. Until you try. You'll never feel happy. you try. You never try until you try. Never try until you try. Everybody needs this. Everybody needs this happy thing. Everybody needs this. Everybody needs this happy thing.
But the next slide has a picture of, oh, there it is, okay. So the Cape Luther Institute / Island School campus has a absolutely amazing wet lab, and these tanks are used to grow tilapia and other species of fish for research purposes and rehabilitation purposes. So there are some sharks, some small lemon sharks for research and rehabilitation, as well as a way to sustain the Island School community, CI community, for special meals throughout the year. So the tilapia grown was used for a cleaner way to feed the community on special events during the year. So the garden and farm right on site, the Cape Luther Institute and Island School pride itself on being a self-sustaining and educational community. So this is one part of the poo-poo garden. It uses waste products for fertilization for numerous fruits, vegetables, and flowering plants that are used throughout the campus and for meals. So it's so many different fruits. I've never even heard of half of them, and they were amazing. All very sugary and very sweet, except for tamarind, which was very sour. So the farm raises free-range pigs, goats, and chickens for clean food production, and they use wind power energy, a giant wind vane, to power I want to say 80% of the campus, as well as the adjacent communities in southern Eleuthera. So they're very focused on clean energy and other types of. Okay, so this is the boat that we were on most of the week for at least 7 to 8 hours a day. It was a small boat, about, that doesn't do it justice, but it was very small. But we were out on that boat all day, and we had to be very, very quiet when trying to find the bonefish aggregations at the sites we went to. So we had to use a stick to get around, and it was very difficult because the wind kept blowing the boat around. So to be very silent was kind of a challenge when you've never been bone fishing before, and the interns with us were very, very good at it, and some of the students were not. But bonefish stir up the sediment, and they're a very, very important part of the tourism economy and angling industry in southern Eleuthera and the Bahamas and the Florida Keys. So this Cape Luther Institute participates in an international bonefish tagging program. So our goal for the week was to tag as many bonefish as possible. So we seined at the mouth of a river, some of the estuaries going out to the ocean. We seined for hours on end, and we used a Bohemian fishing guide to learn techniques to find substantial schools of bonefish to try and tag as many as possible. So this is our schedule for the day. We started out with a run swim at 6:30 in the morning. The run swim is basically a staple of the Island School, as Jack has participated in also. So you're running for about a mile. We did shorter ones, but you're running for a mile and you're swimming for another mile. So it was a great way to start the day. And then we would have breakfast. A mangrove, we did mostly fish ID classes and dissections of bonefish. So that clip you saw in the video, that was one of our best buddies. But we did fish ID slideshows and doing individual projects using the small library at the Island School. So it was a really great way to, if we ever, any of the students wanted to continue doing marine biology and ecology after later on in life, then it's a really great introduction into that. And then lunch, Mangrove Fun Day, we would go and study the different types of mangroves. So the Bahamas has a abundance of red mangrove, so that red stalk you saw in the video, that's basically, it's a high salt area, which facilitates the growing of that red mangrove. Dish crew dinner, and then we would go out and explore Eleuthera and the wonderful wildlife it has, and the beautiful plants, and basically untouched by any development or other industries. But it was a really, really amazing time, and I learned so much, and it really fostered my sense of how I wanted to study sciences in college and all that stuff. And Jack basically summed it up with his trip. But I want to say a few thank yous to the Poole family for giving me this amazing, amazing grant to do this. I would not have been able to study at the Cape Eleuthera Institute for a week if I did not have this grant. The Taft Grant Committee, Holly, who is the head of, who's the intern in charge of the group, and then the Island School and the Cape Eleuthera Institute. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or ask me. It's a really great opportunity for anybody interested in the sciences, and I hope you consider it. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Lauren Fadiman, and I'm going to give the fastest morning meeting speech you have ever seen. And if it's more than 5 minutes, you are free to say mean things to me in the hallway. So as I said, I'm Lauren Fadiman, and I woke up early that morning when my flight landed in JFK. After turning on my cellular service, an exciting start, I know, I found exactly one text from my sister. It read, "Mom and I will be there soon, bring Jamba Juice or else." They didn't arrive at the airport for an hour and a half, but I also didn't bring them Jamba Juice, so we were even, I suppose. My suitcase was weighed down with pebbles I had collected, a small paper booklet embellished with a child's looping script, all the collected treasures of my trip. I fell asleep in the car on the way home and thought vaguely, in the way that half-dreamers tend to, of a river flashing red with sockeye salmon swimming home as they have always done, of hills that roll unperturbed, untouched, unfathomably soft on and on into the sky. Like most stories, my brief experience this summer in the small village of Agiagig, Alaska, did not actually begin at the beginning. It did not begin in JFK in the early hours of a summer morning. It did not begin in the bush plane I boarded in Anchorage, which you can see on the right. In fact, it did not begin with me at all, and it would be disingenuous of me to narrate that kind of story. I cannot tell you how old Agiagig is, but I can tell you that it is a village steeped in culture, Yupik culture precisely, and more precisely than that, Central Yupik culture. And there's Alaska. The massive red dot is over Lake Iliamna, which you can see. There's the dot again, in the central Yupik region on the west coast of Alaska. And there's Lake Iliamna. Agiagig is right there in the circle. Agiagig is situated on the southwest end of Lake Iliamna at the mouth of the Kwichak River and is named for a Yupik word meaning like a throat that swallows water. If you want me to be really, really precise, and I know you do, the exact dialect of Yupik spoken is Lake Iliamna Yupik, a dialect spoken fluently by, if I remember correctly, only about 25 elders situated around the lake, a shockingly small amount. Imagine preserving a language that only the inhabitants of USGD speak. No easy task, especially if you know us well. Agiagig itself is approximately the size of Congdon, between 50 and 75 inhabitants depending on the time of the year, most of whom identify as Alaska Native. Some people leave to fish and hunt elsewhere during the summer, as residents of Alaska have long done. And in the spring, nearly the whole village leaves Agiagig and travels elsewhere for several weeks, usually to stay with another group of indigenous people. New Zealand last year and Arizona in a few months. There's Agiagig again. There's the airport. and that's the Queecheg River running along the left. But Agiagig was bustling while I was there. Elders and adults, teens and kids, and a sudden influx of babies, 4 in 1 year, including twins. And me, I wasn't one of the babies though. By my best estimate, for 2 weeks, I was just about 1.5% of Agiagig's population. And I learned more from the other 98.5% than I could ever possibly tell you in these, hopefully, 5 minutes. Most of what I learned, I'm still trying to understand myself. The top left is a picture of the Alaskan taiga. The top right is the building I worked in. Bottom left is the beach looking out onto Lake Iliamna. And the bottom right is the Queecheg River, the mouth of it. I found myself in Agiagig to intern for the Village Tribal Council President Alex Anna Salmon, a Dartmouth grad and lifelong Agiagig resident who returned home after college to work on behalf of her family, friends, hometown, and culture. Her current biggest initiative is a language preservation grant. Its name translates to We All Speak Lake Iliamna Yupik. Simply put, the prime objective of the grant is to raise children in the village who speak their first words in Yupik. Again, this is not an easy endeavor. The instructors, Alex Anna included among others, are learning more advanced language lessons even as they teach simpler ones. They make their own teaching materials, draft their own lesson plans, and act as instructors in conjunction with their other roles around the village. I mostly helped Alex Anna create Yupik classroom tools. Jeopardy games and worksheets, calendars with the days and weeks translated into Yupik, you know the kind of thing I'm talking about. I was also there to make a short video about the program, one that they can show their grant managers and hopefully use to fund future Yupik initiatives. I am not going to show you the video, but it does exist. I also worked in the village greenhouse with a man named Jeff Bringhurst. Oh, this is not the right slide. I switched them around, but I'll get to that in a second. Who had first come to Agiagig as a teacher, but became shortly after that the local greenhouse manager. A range of crops are grown in the village and sold to nearby fishing and hunting lodges, tomatoes and squash, for example, in addition to native Alaskan crops. It's not an easy place to grow, though. You see, there are no honeybees in Agiagig, Alaska, and the ones Jeff had shipped to the village quickly escaped into the taiga, never to be seen again. Alas. So while managing the greenhouse alone for a few days while Jeff traveled, I hand-pollinated tens of squash plants, looking for the delicate flowers amidst spiky stems. The kids of the village joined me, and the little ones plucked strawberries and tomatoes to eat while I watered. The steady pace of this work grounded my days. 2 watering cans to the greenhouse, water, refill buckets, 2 watering cans to the greenhouse, water, repeat. In truth, I received more than I could have possibly given the residents of Agiagig, Alaska. As much as we do here at Taft to build community, I learned the true value of that elusive phenomenon in Agiagig, where children gather each night at the school to play basketball, where friends invite strangers like me to go tubing down the Queecheg River despite its bitterly cold waves, where families pick the berries that grow all across the Alaskan taiga and make jam and akutik. And this is literally the ground. Everywhere you walk, there are berries. Where the entire village has a rotating schedule of chores, collecting village recycling, cleaning the school, and so on. And I join in, mopping the floors of Agiagig High School at night, racing down hallways, tiptoeing the thin line between work and play, where I attend 2 potlucks in 2 weeks and play board games into the still glimmering late nights of the Alaskan summer. This learning was possible foremost because of Taft, because of the profound and inexplicable and much appreciated generosity of the Hatfield family, not to mention the support of Mrs. Frew and Mr. Shotwell, the latter of whom got in contact with a friend who got in contact with a friend who took me into her village and home for 2 weeks this summer. If you are interested in traveling to serve with a program or finding your own solo work this summer, you should. Find work that gives you meaning, allows you to do tangible good, and makes you, ultimately, kinder and more thoughtful, with hands always ready to lift what must be lifted, to hold, to carry, to do all the necessary and simple and wonderful human things of life. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you. That was 6 minutes, so I'm going to run.